Today, I want to talk to you about a few items that will complement your 3D printing toolkit. So today, I'm not going to talk about 3D printers. I'm going to talk about 3D printing related subjects and stuff you might need either for post-processing or to support your 3D printing experience. So the first item I want to talk to you about is a 3D printing pen. I'm not an artist, so we'll find out why I recommend to have one of these. And then this odd hair gun, very simple, cheap and small one, which you might find useful for your 3D printing post-processing. And finally, an uninterruptible power supply, or UPS, which is sitting right next to me. So let's jump into them and see why do I recommend having one of these items. Okay, so this is the Mightywell 3D printing pen. It's pretty simple, just has one slider for speed, and then there is a back button and a front button. So that's as simple as it gets. And then you get a power supply, of course, which I already plugged in, plus this two fingertip covers, some kind. They kind of look like probably Chinese size, so they don't fit in my not so big fingers. Unless this is for this finger and this one is for the pinky finger, because that's the only place where it fits. But never mind, I'm going to use this just to avoid burning myself. So the operation is pretty simple. You just plug in the plug, and you have to wait for the yellow light to turn green, and then you can thread in your filament. In the meanwhile, I have this piece of filament here, and just to cut off the end bit. And then we're just going to be waiting for a while until this LED light here turns green. So after like 10 minutes, we have the green LED light, and the pen is purging a bit. So I have this leftover bit of filament, unnamed brand. So what you do, you just stick it in here in the hole, and then you press the forward button. And that will activate the motor that feeds the filament. Now it will take a while. It's a bit clumsy to use with a wire attached, but yeah. Okay, so I fixed the clog. So let's get it going again. So you feed this in, and looks like it's a ceramic nozzle on the front, so looks kind of cool. So you might be wondering, why do I want to discuss about a 3D pen? I'm not an artist or nothing like that, so and the reason is I find it useful as a welding machine, and let me show what I mean by that. So here I have my R2D2 cup holder, which has suffered a bit of a mishap, and the leg broke off. And actually the leg was attached in the first place with a 3D pen. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to apply some PLA here, and then while still hot, I'll just squeeze it on. And that is that simple. So I'm going to apply some more here, so let me tune it a bit down. I'm going to apply some more weld here. And there you go. the leg is now firmly attached. And of course, on top of this, you might want to do with it. One final note, this pen has been designed for ABS, so the temperature might be a bit too high for PLA. So if you want to print on thin hair, you might find it's difficult because it's probably too hot for PLA. And that's it for the 3D printing pen. So as you saw, the 3D printing pen is a tool that you might use to fix your 3D prints. You can use it to weld PLA or ABS instead of using other chemicals. And you can use this basically as a welding device. The principle is pretty much the same as when you're doing with normal regular welding. The second item I recommend is this hot air gun. It comes with this accessory, which is a tool that you can use for heat shrink tubing, so useful for electronics. Actually, this is targeted, I would say, mostly for electronic hobbies, so you might also find it useful when you're doing electronic jobs. The advantage towards a normal, or let's say a regular full-sized hot hand gun is that this is, for example, is 350 watts, so it's reasonably small. And the fan doesn't blow so hard, and the heat that comes out, yeah, it's hot, but you can work with it without too much risk of burning. And I find very useful that there is this kickstand here, so you can lay it down, and that's how I use it usually. So I leave this standing still, and I move the items in front of it. So very useful if you have a slight stringing, or if you want to polish or smoothen out some of the imperfections on your 3D print. And this is an example of how I use the Tacklife mini heat gun. So these are the parts that I used for my Pruchased mini clone, and you can find a link in the card up here. So you see I use Sulu SPLA, and it's quite stringy. So that's how I use the heat gun for. So after a short pass under the heat of the heat gun, all the stringing is basically gone. Now you see I'm using it with my bare hands, which is not super recommended. In the beginning it seems like it's not so hot, but after a while it becomes a bit difficult to handle. So you see here the final results, and the stringing is basically gone. I have some failure from the print, but that's not a big deal. This is another example. That's the Y belt carriage, and you see there's stringing here as well. So that's also where I put my heat gun to good use. And in this case, it was quite an easy game because the stringing is very light. So I actually decided after this I was passing it onto all my parts, and I find it very useful. There is this kickstand in the bottom, so you can leave the heat gun standing and you just move your parts around it. And that's it. So I actually decided to go through all the parts, and the final result was quite good in my opinion. So now we're going to test this UPS, Uninterruptible power supply. This is an Italian one I got from Amazon. You can find the link in the description. I also found other options in the US, for example. This is a 900 volt ampere, so it's 900 watts of stored power. So let's see what happens when we shut off the main power. So to check that, I'm going to just try to print something, just a random one, and I have no filament there because I don't think that's needed. So I'm just going to heat it up, let it start printing on air, and then after a while I'll just disconnect power and see what happens. So now I'm ghost printing, and I would say most of the power should be drawn by the hot end and by the heated bed. So I'm going to wait for the hot end to stabilize a bit, and I think we're pretty much there. I set it to 115 degrees. So now we're going to see what happens when I switch off the power to the power supply. And there you go. Now the printer is printing off the power supply. And here we are. So the printer stopped, and it was like probably 8 or 9 minutes into the print. So all in all, I'm pretty satisfied with this piece of hardware. This is what have saved me from screwing a print. Usually in my house I have a glitch every now and then of a few seconds or a minute at the max, so that will save a print, especially if you are into long prints. That's cool. This is very useful for me. As you saw in the video, it can keep your printer alive for quite a few minutes, so leaving you the time to fix what is going on with your power supply line and or to manage glitches or very short power interruptions. I think it's worth the while, especially if you are running 3D printers quite heavily. So yeah, overall I recommend that. And this is the end of today's video, so you'll find links in the description below together with a few other links which bring you to affiliate pages. I can get a small commission out of it if you purchase anything off that list, so that will be helpful for me. But feel free just to browse around, no strings attached. I hope you enjoyed the video and that you stay with me for the next episodes, and until next time,